Yom Yerushalayim Sameach, everyone. Thanks for coming along with the first share in this series. Going through the Rambam's Hakdama, his introduction to Perek Chelek. First of all, what is Rambam's Hakdama to Perek Chelek? Well, okay, so it's often discussed and thought of and referred to as if it's some sort of separate work. What it actually is, Rambam he's got his three famous works. He's got his commentary to the Mishnah, he's got his Mishnah Torah, and he's got his Moreh Nevuchim. Those are considered his three major works. And as part of his parish to the Mishnah, as part of his commentary to the Mishnah, he gave various introductions to certain, his one famous introduction to the whole of the Mishnah. And this is an introduction which is just for the Perek of Chelek, the final, in some editions, the final chapter of Masechet Sanhedrin. And it's quite a unique chapter, as we'll see. And therefore the Rambam decided that people need a whole long introduction just to deal with the subject matter which is discussed in it, which is what? So it's going to get into things like Olam Haba, Tichiyat HaMeisim, resurrection of the dead, and Yom Mashiach, reward and punishment, all the nice big Gan Eden, Gehinnom, all the big juicy topics that people talk about a lot, but the Rambam claims they don't really have a clear idea what they're referring to when they do talk about these things. So again, some of the groups of people, some of the views that Rambam was talking about, he's talking about people who lived in his day around 1,000 years ago, but some of them at least will be able to recognize as being still relevant in our day. And the idea is that really, when it comes to Olam Haba, reward and punishment, so we have very clear ideas within Judaism that there is such thing as reward and punishment. God knows what we do. He rewards us for when we do well. He punishes us for what we do badly. We know that there's some time in the future where things are going to be different. Yom Mashiach, Judgment Day, Olam Haba, whatever it's called, and there'll be times of justice, reward, punishment, resurrection of the dead. These are all sort of very general concepts that we have come from the Nevi'im, comes to some extent from the Torah itself. But the Rambam says when you try and actually pin down details of what these things are, it's very hard. And he points out that people have vastly different views of what these things mean. So one thing the Rambam tries to do in this Haggadah is he tries to give some kind of order and structure to these different phenomena, these different principles, and agree or disagree. And again, not all the commentaries go along with the Rambam's approach, but at least he gives some kind of structure, framework for which all of these things can be fitted in. This is a book which contains all of the Rambam's Hakdamat. So it's got his Hakdama to the Mishnah in general, it's got his Hakdama to Perek Chelek, the Shmuel Parokim, it's got his Hakdama to Perek Chelek. They're all taken from different parts of his commentary to the Mishnah. Each time he felt that he can't just go in and write a small commentary on a particular Mishnah. He has to give some kind of greater insight or introduction to it.
It's just the introduction, not the rest of the commentary.
Right. The rest of the commentary, there are some editions of the Mishnayot which have under each Mishnah, it's got the Rambam's parish to it. It's a whole work. He wrote it when he was in his 20s, which itself is quite an achievement. He'd been on the road. He'd gone into exile, into Golos. He was kicked out by the Muslims, I think, late teenage years or maybe around the age of 20. And him and his father, his family, they were trekking through North Africa trying to find a place they could live. And while they were trekking through North Africa, Rambam was sitting there with his pen and paper, so to speak, writing down his commentary in the Mishnah, which is just a phenomenal. I don't know how many books he had access to at the time, but just imagine what he was going through when he was writing all this, when he was putting it all together. It's just phenomenal in its own right. So one theme that's going to come up time and time again, and at least we'll introduce a little bit now, is that when we talk about these concepts of reward and punishment and the way they are related by the Chachamim, our minds, we are physical people, we are physical beings living in the physical world, and therefore our focus tends to be on physical reward and punishment. That's what grabs our attention. And to the extent this is what has made Islam so popular in the recent centuries. Because if you tell someone, do what I'm going to tell you to do, follow these mitzvot, they're quite difficult, But if you do, you'll be able to bask in the Zivah Shekhinah, the light of the Shekhinah. You'll get this great spiritual enlightenment when you're not everyone's so excited by that. Yeah, some people are chachamim will realize what it means, but it's not easy to sell a religion based on a spiritual connection to God, a great intellectual understanding of the. It's something which not everyone jumps at. Tell people go and blow yourself up somewhere, and you'll get the 72 virgins, and you get whole countries of people running along to to dedicate themselves to the cause. So one thing Rambam points out is that when you deal with the reward and punishment, Olam Haba, Gehenna, all these things, it's much easier to sell it if you are phrasing it in physical terms. And he's going to point out there are some that talk in spiritual terms, some that talk in physical ones, but the ones that people tend to relate to much more are the physical rewards and punishments. Right, it's true. I guess the Muslims have that as well. So. And the other thing which we're going to look at is that Perek Chelek and the Jewish texts which deal with reward and punishment and Olam Haba and Mazah, the vast majority of them are not phrased in halachic statements. They're not clear-cut halachic statements. And therefore, in order to delve into and understand what the Chachamim are telling us when they're telling us ideas of reward and punishment and the afterlife, we're going to have to develop a methodology of how to tackle Agadic works, the Midrashim. Because as we know, or as the Rambam assumes people know, Agada sometimes is literal, but very often it isn't. Sometimes the Chachamim will use certain parables, certain mashalim in order to convey an idea, but there's not necessarily literal. So what to take literally, what not to take literally, that is something which we're also going to have to tackle when it comes to getting a grasp on matters of the afterlife. So start off here. It's something you can follow with Safaria. I think Yoel told me he can send you a link if you want, or you can just listen to me read if you're if I can enjoy the show. The Rambam starts off by quoting the first Mishnah in Perek Chelek, which is the 10th or 11th chapter of Sanhedrin. There are different versions. Some versions swap it around, and it starts off by saying, Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek l'olam haba. Famous statement. All of Israel have a share in Olam Haba. What is Olam Haba? Ask lots of people, get different answers, but we assume it's something good. It's something which is coming in the future by the sounds of it. And everyone, all Jews at least, have a chelek in it. Shenamar, as it says, Ba'amech kulam tzadikim, is a quote from the prophet Yeshaya. Your nation, all of them are righteous. La'olam yushu ha'aretz. They will all inherit the land. And the land here is understood by the Mishnah not seemingly to be a inheritance of a physical land, not a regular inheritance of the land, but an inheritance of Olam Haba, the world to come. So we already see that the Mishnah, before we even get to the Rambam's interpretation, the Mishnah is interpreting this verse in Yeshaya. A lot of the messianic visions and the afterlife visions come from the prophet Yeshaya. He's interpreting it not quite in a literal way. That La'olam Yushu Aretz, the nation will inherit the land, refers to Olam Haba. The Elu She'ein Lahem Chelek Olam Haba. So we see that there's a small print. Not everyone gets it. You have the big banner. Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek l'olam haba. Everyone gets it. Then you get the small print. Well, it seems that certain people can forfeit their share in Olam Haba. So it sounds like everyone has, to begin with, the way it's being read, everyone has some kind of chelek. But you can do certain things to forfeit your share. And what are these things? The Mishnah spells out. Ha'omer ein tchias hamesim, brackets Minatara. Some editions have Minatara, some don't. Someone who denies the fact that there is resurrection of the dead. Which, again, in the Gemara, it may be synonymous with Olam Haba, or may not be. This is some of the questions we're going to have to tackle. But denial of the fact that there's some kind of afterlife, some kind of future better life and better world in which the prophecies and the reward and punishment, the ultimate judgment can take place, that is something which causes you to lose your chelek. Why is it such a severe thing? Just as a matter, if you're a good Jew, you chesed, Torah, tefillah, you're living a good life, but you deny the fact there's Olam Haba and Tchias HaMesim. What is so serious about that? Right. As in, why is it? You may say I'm in doubt about it, or you may say I don't know, but there's someone who actually said Omer ain't Tchias HaMesim. Um, it's interesting. We're going to get to something later. The final section of this Hakdama is the famous Yud Gimel Ikrei Emunah, the 13 Principles of Faith, which are actually in full. They're fully written out in detail by the Rambam here. In the Siddurim, we have an abbreviated version, but in the Rambam's version, you actually have to positively believe in these things to get Olam Haba. What the Mishnah quotes is that you forfeit your share if you positively state that you don't believe in it, which is a difference of emphasis. You have to, in order to forfeit it, you have to make a positive statement to exclude yourself from the klal. And what's interesting is when the Rambam writes it down in Mishnah Torah and Hilchot Teshuvah, he takes the Mishnah's version, Ha'omer Ein Tchias HaMesim min Torah, and over his version he writes here. So that's something which we'll get to at the end of this when we get up. I've got a chapter in my book about contrasting the presentation of the Yud Gimel Ikrei Emunah in Hilchot Teshuvah with the ones in this Parish Mishnah. So when we get to the end, we'll get into the detail of that. It's just something to note. So you have to possibly say Ein Tchias HaMesim min Torah, and why is it so severe and so serious? So a teacher of mine I had years ago, Moshe Rabinowitz, he teaches in the Breslov Shul in Shaarei Chesed. So the way he understood it, I learned this together with him, must have been close to 20 years, about 20 years ago. And he said that we look around the world now and we clearly see it. It's faulty. There are clearly things that are not right in the world. There's so much suffering. There's so much evil. And we look around and we said, well, what's going on? Where's the divine justice? So if you deny that there's any future better era, what you're essentially saying is that this is the world that God created as it's supposed to be. And that's tantamount to saying, God forbid, that God has some sort of evil or some sort of bad wish or is unable to create a better world. So the way he explained it, again, I don't know if it's his Kiddush, I haven't seen this in any other writings that I've looked around, so it could be it's his Kiddush. But it strikes me as a very great insight that saying Ein Tchias HaMesim min Torah means all the people of, I was today at the memorial site, the Nova Festival, looking around all these memorials for people who cut down and their youth, their height of their life, and you're thinking this is the world that God created. So the idea that there is Tchias HaMesim min Torah and there is Yemos HaMashiach and there is a divine plan. We may, as Eov says, the conclusion of the book of Eov is we can't hope necessarily to understand the divine plan. We have faith in it, but saying there is no future era, there is no Tchias HaMesim, that is something which is basically tantamount to saying God can't do any better than he's doing right now, which is it's a thought. So that's the first one.
Just a question. The Mishnah starts by saying Kol Yisrael, like all Israel, meaning just Israel. Like at least he's speaking. He doesn't say anything necessarily about other nations.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says Ve'elu she'ein lehem. But when he says Ve'elu she'ein lehem, does it mean like only refers to Jews, or could this refer to anyone in the world who falls into these categories?
So it's a big topic, especially because the next Mishnah in this Perek starts talking about the people that don't have the kings that haven't had the Shen Olam Haba, and some of these are non-Jewish kings or pre-Jewish kings. So the implication seems to be that non-Jews can have a Shen Olam Haba. I think the Rambam writes in Hilchos Malachim that he says that Chasidei Umas Ha'olam, the exact way to translate Hasidim, because Rambam writing Hasidim isn't what we take to be Hasidim today, but yes, the pious, the righteous among the nations who fulfill the Noahide laws and do it as a matter of worshipping God, meaning they believe in God and they fulfill the Noahide laws as a way of worshipping God. They can have a chelek, but it's almost like the opposite. Kol Yisrael have a chelek min ha'haba unless they do something to forfeit it, whereas the Umat Ha'olam have to positively do something they have to go out of their way in order to earn it. They have to have this belief in God and live the right sort of life. Again, it's only 7 instead of 613, but they have to positively do something to count themselves into Olam Haba. whereas we have to do something to exclude ourselves based on the covenant we have with God. That's, I think, is the simplest way of presenting it. Quite how narrow or wide that category is, there's a lot of the Umat Olam there's a lot of debate about.
So you would incline to say that this, when they say Elo She'elahem, would also apply to non-Jews who would not believe in the following, or
So on the one hand, it would be logical to think yes. On the other hand, if you say that as long as they believe in God and they're keeping the Noahide laws, it could be they can believe. Yeah, if they're not performing Avodah Zarah and they have some sort of belief in God, if they don't believe in Kriyat HaMeisim, it could be they're okay with that. There's debate, for example, about Christianity. The Rishonim argue about whether I think everyone agrees that from the perspective of the Jews, it's illegitimate. The Rambam has it, it's certainly Catholicism, which was the Christianity in his day, it's absolute Avodah Zarah, absolute, complete Avodah Zarah. Whereas some of the Balei Tosfos said it's some sort of shittuv, some sort of version of monotheism, which is illegitimate for Jews, but for non-Jews, they can still be somewhat within the fold of they're not considered to be idolaters. So we see to some extent there are views which make it easier for the non-Jews to keep things than it is for us. So yeah, there's a lot of debate. Again, each of these points there are whole books written about. It is the Rambam. It's not quite the way. It's one of those possible contradictions that, or interesting things that the Rambam has both in Hilchos Malachim, because the Rambam says that when he's talking about he's bringing the halachas of Mashiach and how we recognize Mashiach, what Mashiach will do, and one of the things is that the world we brought to a position of monotheism. The whole world, when one of the signs of Mashiach is that everyone will recognize that there's one God. And he says that even though Christianity and Islam is incorrect, particularly Christianity from his perspective, they are tools that God brought into the world in order to bring people closer to be able to accept the monotheism of Jews. So on the one I think it's a little bit, it's an interesting middle ground. I'm not quite sure exactly how to define it, but he definitely says that Christianity is about Avodah Zarah. I think it may be in, is it Garrett Tayman? I'll get the exact source for you next week. It's definitely Avodah Zarah, but I think it's a more sophisticated, better version of Avodah Zarah than bowing down to just to a stone. So I'm not sure you can let you get away with that statement either. But in terms of what his focus is there is how easy will it be when Mashiach comes along and wants to teach people about the monotheism of Judaism? How easy will it be for Mashiach to come along and teach people it? If you're coming along to a bunch of Amazon tribes who bow down to their ancestors and doing all sorts of crazy things and sacrificing kids and bowing down to the stars, it'll be very hard for Mashiach to come along, and they won't even have the base kibble. They won't have the capabilities, the intellectual functions. They won't have the thought categories to be able to accept one God in heaven. Whereas if you're speaking to Christians, they have an idea of a God in heaven, albeit it's one which is the Trinity and which makes it Avodah Zarah, but it's some kind of grasp of divinity which is closer to Jewish monotheism than pure paganism. So I think that's... Say that again, no? Right. I mean, they read it the way they read it in translated is problematic because they translate Elohim as being a multiple, all these sorts of things.
I mean, I guess my understanding would be that he is saying basically that yes, Christianity and Islam have have a positive aspect
Yes,
that they could bring to the world, but it doesn't necessarily like make it correct. Like it's just like okay, that's like it's basically saying like Kilu, like let's say if someone on a Pastor Jew would go to the gym on Shabbat, okay, like yeah, it's good for his body. He'll get in shape. It seems to be a good thing, but in the end, he still shouldn't do it because he cannot go to the. It's not he shouldn't do it on Shabbat. But like there's still some merit to it. Like it has a positive effect in some way.
I get all these questions about about allowing people to do Machalel Shabbat in order to be Makarev,
Right.
lots of people. It's one of these because it's not the right thing to do, objectively from a perspective. Will it bring benefits? Yeah, it will. But if you ask a Rav, he's not going to be able to permit you to drive in a car to go and be
Right.
Makarev people. 10 years down the road, you may say that it's brought about benefits. That's that same sort of thing. Actually, Islam is saying that when you mention Islam, the Rambam does believe that Islam is monotheism.
Right.
The problem with Islam is that it has problems with it rejects Torah Shamayim and the idea that
Yeah.
of Moshe's unique nevuah, which is the things we're going to get to later. So Islam, I think, he would say they could potentially, with the belief of Islam, be part of the Hasidei Yom HaSa'alam. Again, not murdering comes into it as well, so that's a different question. But in terms of the belief of monotheism of Avodah Zarah, so they could be within the Chassidim for that. Christianity is a good point you're bringing in. It will bring people closer to the monotheism of Judaism because it will allow, when Mashiach comes along, it will allow him to teach the world about monotheism more easily because it's bring the three down to one and it's a one transcendent. But it's still from the Rambam perspective, it's illegitimate of Avodah Zarah, as opposed to the Badai Tosfos and some others who view it as some kind of shittuf, which is illegitimate for Jews, but not Avodah Zarah for non-Jews. You never have people make statements without evidence. I hear it every day. Right. I mean, someone who comes along and makes these sort of statements to exclude himself from Al he's doing it as a matter of ideology, not a matter of scientific proof. So, essentially, what you're saying that the Christian belief makes it easier for us to believe. They believe that it could happen already, not just that it could happen in the future.
I mean, there are records of it in Judaism as well. I think in the Tanakh, yeah, I think Eliyahu and Elisha, like they were able to somehow, like some sort of, like bring some
Well,
like.
you're right. It's such a difficult topic that there's another whole Garrett the Roman wrote just on Chit Amazing. So. Right. So that's again that's a big topic. He doesn't actually discuss it much here, which is itself a big topic. And because he doesn't discuss it much, people were sort of claiming the Rambam didn't really believe in resurrection of the dead. And he wrote a Holy Gerrit, which may be one of our future series, a Holy Gerrit to Chesed Hamesim, where he goes through what we can and can't know about it and what he does and doesn't say about it. Yeah, it's a very big topic. It could be. I thought what you were going to say was that what's your name? Moshe Chaim. So I think you're going to relate to what Moshe Chaim brought up, which is that when the Rambam says that God brought about the Christianity into the world, even though it was a mistaken belief, because it would bring the the nations all together closer to correct beliefs. You could say the same thing about the resurrection, because the Christianities so strongly push it that it no longer seems to be such a weird and strange belief for us to believe it. But yeah, and he hasn't. Right. There must be something better there. We just don't know what it is, right? To add to what you're going to say, as in this is a bit of a spoiler for what's coming, but on all these major points, only one of them he deals with here, but when it comes to Yom Mashiach, right at the end of Mishnah Torah, the Rambam writes that we don't actually have a clear Masorah of what happens in the days of Mashiach. And we know there will be an era, we know it will be much better, we got certain things we know, but how to interpret the various prophecies of the prophets, exactly the details, we can't know. We have faith that will happen, and it's a munah, as you said. The same thing when it comes to Tichas HaMesim. The Rambam's letter he writes, it's a mofet, it's a miracle. And the Rambam of all people is the ultimate. So he's called the rationalist. He tries to understand everything and bring proofs to everything. He says the reason I didn't write anything in Moreh Nevuchim about Tchias HaMesim, the reason I just wrote one line in the other works is because I don't understand it, and there's nothing more to say about it. God said there'll be Tchias HaMesim, it'll be Tchias HaMesim. How it works, it's not something which I can write about because I don't understand it. I can't do an experiment to prove it. And the same thing Olam Haba is going to say here that this is even something the Gemara says that Ein Lo Rasa, the human eye cannot see and cannot comprehend what Olam Haba will be. We can bring the Shalom, we can discuss, as we're going to discuss the structure of Olam Haba and the things leading up to it, but ultimately the nature of what Olam Haba is, because it's a fully spiritual realm, it's something which our soul perceives. That's something, again, we're going to get to discuss this a lot more as we go through this Hakadama. But yeah, a lot of what it's saying is, it's fine to say I don't get it. It's a matter of emunah. I believe the Torah says that these concepts do exist. Yeah, the Rambam will always try and define what we can understand and try and push. He always tries to probe and push and say to try and show what we can understand as much as possible. But he definitely will say that there are certain things we have to sit back and say, yeah, we've got that's the point. That's the point. We have to stop and just have belief. Is emunah.
If the people is okay, like I would suggest that if we can try to focus
Right, you get we got halfway through the Mishnah now, so let's try to finish it. So the first thing, Ein Tchias HaMesim Min HaTorah, which actually that brackets adds one of the points. It could be, according to some versions, some Girusas of the Mishnah, is not denying Tchias HaMesim altogether, which excludes it from Olam. It's denying Tchias HaMesim Min HaTorah, meaning the Torah doesn't make any demands of any belief, doesn't make any statements about Tchias HaMesim. You can or allegories or mashalim. This is something he goes into more in the Segeret Tchias HaMesim. He doesn't go into much in this letter. Ein Torah min hashamayim. If someone denies the divinity of the Torah, it's also something which gets included out of Olam Haba. V'apikoros, and apikoros, which gets defined in the in various places. He's going to discuss it later in this Hagdama. Rabbi Akiva Omer af hakara b'sfarim hachitzonim, which again is a big topic. Someone who reads external books, which is normally understood to mean books of the idolaters. it's interesting because people bring all the Rambam when he writes in Moreh Nevuchim, he writes that he went through in order to explain the various of the mitzvahs, his Tamei mitzvahs, they're based on him having read all of the books of the idolatry that he could get his hand on in order to understand how the Torah is trying to distance us from that. So, so that is an understanding. So that's a separate understanding. I'll come back to that in a second. So one explanation is there's a difference between reading books of Avodah Zarah in order to understand what to distance yourself from, in order to understand statements of the Torah or the sages which are keeping us away from Avodah Zarah. Meaning, if you're reading them lishma, so to speak, not to read them. I want to find out about Christianity. It's really interesting. Maybe there's something I can learn from it. But I want to learn what I'm being distanced from. That is legitimate. And we know that one of the things that Sanhedrin had to master, they had to have knowledge of all of the Avodah Zarah, all the languages, all the Avodah Zarah that was around, because they had to judge people, they had to pass a ruling on people who are of the Avodah Zarah, so they had to be experts in Avodah Zarah. So it clearly can't mean anyone who learns anything about Avodah Zarah or reads their books. So one explanation is there's a difference between whether you are learning it, so to speak, lishma, in order to understand what not to do, and learning it in order to, because you're excited about the knowledge and can learn from it. The other, another explanation which I think you're referring to, is more mechudash, but it's actually very, very interesting, is hakora. Here, in this context, hakora doesn't mean just reading it, like reading a particular book off the shelf to read it. Kriya refers to Kriyat Torah, the Kriya of the Megillot, Kriyat Esther. So Kriya in halacha has certain connotations of reading something from a scroll as a davar shebekadusha. So the Chachamim, again, it's actually interesting when you look back historically, what was canonized and how it was canonized. There was a debate among the Tanaim about which books of Tanakh should and shouldn't be in it, over Shir Hashirim, over Sefer Yechezkel. It wasn't always so clear that all the things that we have now as part of Tanakh were always going to be part of Tanakh. But there were Machriya, the Sanhedrin Paskin on it. Certain books were in Tanakh and certain things are not in Tanakh. Some things which are excluded, like the book of Maccabim, the book of Judith, book of Enoch. There are certain books which, again, I haven't read them, so so looked up references, but I've never actually read them properly, so I can't comment. But there are certain things in them which people claim are not so distant from things which in Jewish sources. So there may have been groups, and there may still be groups, who look at some of these books, say the Maccabim, the book of Enoch, and I think the Ethiopian Jews have some other books, and they want to read them as a Dvarim Shebekadusha, and read them in shul, like we read the Haftarahs, and we have the Kriya of Kohelet and Shir Hashirim, things which aren't always accepted. They want to read some of these other books as Dvarim Shebekadusha. So Koras Sfarim Chitzonim may, according to some people, refer to Chitzonim, books which were rejected by Chazal and Sanhedrin as Dvarim Shebekadusha, but reading them with Al Kriyat Megillah. So that's another interesting take on it. Halacha Shalom Makkah. So uttering spells over a makkah, over a wound, and this is even words of the Torah, which is actually quite interesting. Using words of the Torah as magic spells to heal things. If you look at I think it's chapter 9 or 10 of Hilchot Avodah Zarah. And it's also in the Sefer HaChinuch. It's actually something which is somewhat controversial nowadays, because it's not the way that we really treat things. But reading words of the Torah and even Tehillim as some kind of magic cure to heal things is forbidden by the Rambam and Sefer HaChinuch and various other sources. What is permitted is to reading Tehillim and Tefillah and reading words of the Torah in order to help you phrase a tefillah to God. So I'm davening to God, I'm davening to Hashem, because He's got the power to heal me, and Tehillim has beautiful words in it, and it's really going to be, as the Sefer HaChinuch says, it can be ma'oreh rachamim, it can be ma'oreh, it can awaken me, and it can help me phrase my tefillah to Hashem. So, but reading Tehillim or reading other things, reading words of the Torah in a mechanic way, because it's got some sort of power, that, according to the Rambam, is prohibited, and for the Rambam, he even, I think, maybe puts it in this category. So again, not everyone paskins it, but for people who are people taking on stringencies and the chumras, this is something which several Rishonim consider to be to be forbidden quite strictly.
That would make some of the segulot that exist in the world possibly
Right.
problematic.
And if you look back at the Sugulot, I think to me there's a big difference between someone saying, read, someone's ill, there's a war going on, whatever it is. So read these Tehillim as part of your Tefillah to Hashem, 100%. Shira Malos Mimakim. Think about the words. You're addressing God. I'm in the depth of despair. Please bring us a Yeshua. Please bring us salvation. 100%. That's what we're supposed to be doing. But read these books of Tehillim 5 times backwards with his words, and while we'll get this is getting into the realm of more problematic things again, according to the Rambam and the Sefer HaChinuch, which is just something to bear in mind. And then the final thing, which I'm not going to get into exactly what that is. Again, it's some sort of using the Shemot of Hashem, not in a way of tefillah and relating to God, but as some sort of magical cure. Tattooing God's name on someone's arm is a way to get them a refuah, something like that. So these are various things which, as you said, ways of getting yourself excluded from Olam Haba. Unless they positively do one of these things which excludes them from Olam Haba. And in Hilchos Teshuvah, chapter 3, Rambam systemizes these things a bit more, explains them. And right at the end of the Perek Chelek, he goes into these things a bit more also.
Does it mean that we are in a context, or just anyway operating them in any sense? Because you would describe it here like operating them in a sense of similarly to like the spell or something, or just generally saying them out loud already.
So I think I see here in the commentary that one of the opinions is that saying the letters. I'm not sure this is which of the Shemot is, but saying it how it's written, not how it's pronounced, because it's a matter of bizayon. So I agree. This one is a different one. It's upper fold. 1 second. As it's written and not as we are told to pronounce it. Yeah. Because only in the Beit HaMikdash you could pronounce God's name. I think the Gemara talks about not just God's name, not just the name that we use, but also the 72 letter name. All the names of Hashem, which we know, we don't know, we know how to pronounce. They're in the Beit HaMikdash. I think the Birkas Kohanim, they used to use these names, and it wasn't supposed to be used anywhere else. And the Gemara goes through that they didn't want it to be brought into disuse and people to use it in the wrong way. So that's what Abba Shalom is adding here. It's separate to the one before. It's separate to the Lochash and
When would it also mean like when someone, let's say the Shem Havaya, when he would say it instead of saying the way how we say it, like where we're basically saying a different name based on the Otiot, like either it's pronounced Elohim or it's pronounced as Adonai. I think based on the Nukudot that's below it, but someone who would actually read it on the letters, like the Yud as this, and like with some Christians, I think, or some people, there's a region where they call themselves by this name.
right.
Like that would be maybe like included in this category. According to our show.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll look into this more for next. Looking for more for next week because this one's the Das Yachid, so I didn't go into this one so much. I'll look it up for next week. We'll track back to the. So that he deals with right at the end. And it's a question of exactly what karet means. Right, because according to the Rambam, karet is being cut off. Simply speaking, is being cut off from the world to come. So, what is the difference between that and the ones in this Mishnah? It's a good question. Is it easier to do teshuvah? Yeah, it's something which is we'll deal with this as we go through it. I think seconds. Right at the end of this, he contrasts the people who don't have the right beliefs, who lose the Shabbat Olam Haba, with people who do Averot, and he says that he has a difference between the two of them. So we'll get there in the course of this. So here the list. He says, "Ein tchilat hamesim min haTorah, ein Torah min hashamayim, apikoros." Those are the three which seems to be everyone agrees. Then we've got ones which Rabbi Akiva adds in Korah Batzvam Chitzonim Malacha Shalamaka. So yeah, so the three which is the Chachamim, which everyone agrees to, are the someone that says that Ein Tchilat Hamesim min haTorah, that no Torah min hashamayim, and an apikoros. That's his first three. And we're gonna go through some of these as we some he's gonna get to straight away, some he's gonna get to further towards the end. And again, kares is a big topic because simply speaking, the Rambam says that someone who does a aveira which you get kares, spiritual decision, is that you lose your shana on above for that. So, what is the difference between that and something of belief? Is it a matter of whether you do it intentionally? Is there a difference between whether you do it to shuvah or not? Are all Yuvei Kares the same? These are things we have to deal with. It's 5 to 8 now. We've now finished the first bit, which is the Mishnah.
I'm at the time.
And this is not this topic. Next week is Shavuot, so I assume we're not going to have I'm not sure we're having a shira that day. So if we're stopping for a couple of weeks, it probably make sense to pick up with Ra'iti the Dabar next.
Like I think nightfall is Shkia 7:42, so 8 o'clock will be exactly 18 minutes after. Would it make sense just so that we did a little bit of the introduction, just to maybe see like what he says in the beginning?
Again, we whatever we do now, we'd have to go over again next week. If there's any other questions or any other discussion, we're going to do that now, and then I'd say next week we just sort of jump straight in.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. But what is it, and how does it relate to these other things? Gan Eden, Tchias HaMesim. This is going to be the big topic. He's going to try and give some kind of seder to all of these concepts. So what we've done this week is basically an introduction. We sort of set up the Mishnah that he's coming to introduce. We've set out a few of the topics and his agenda, what he's trying to give seder for. And next week we'll jump straight in. He's going to start off by giving us 5 different groups of people and their incorrect beliefs, and their jumbled up beliefs in the afterlife and in Tchias HaMesim and in Yemot HaMashiach. And from there, he's going to start trying to say why it is that people go so wrong on these topics, what it is that causes them to get jumbled up, and he's going to start putting forward his approach to Olam Haba, his own right. So, Shah, thank you very much. Thank you. So I'll look into the Hogger yourself more for next week, and the Karas thing I think we'll try and cover in the course of the year.